So basically the argument goes, it's splitting buying power. That's the mental model. So essentially, if you have coins and you want certain coins to do really well, well, if you keep introducing other coins into an ecosystem that may get people interested and take capital away, it's harder for the blue chips, for example, in this case could be Hex, PLS, PLSX, to 10,000x. Like that's kind of like the premise is all the meme coins that come out, all the even utility tokens, even the projects you love, technically the model we're talking about is they're splitting the buying power. They're taking the economic mass that could be put into them, the consciousness that could be put into them, and they're distributing it among other things, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad. My point would be that it's a trade-off, and that you could make a case, I could make a case that if there were less other coins in the community, if there were less projects, if there were less things, and again, I love community projects. I did a lot of good ones. Like I said, I'm a fan of liquid loans and all this stuff. But technically, if every dollar that goes into other projects could have been a dollar that goes into RH products specifically. So how do you think about the trade-offs between supporting the things that can help the community grow, onboard new people, all these wonderful community projects we have? How do you process that with, hey, is it putting the risk of 10,000x, or is it pushing up the timeline even? Instead of doing it in 2 years, if we have all these great community projects that are providing value, but they're also taking capital away, does it take 3 or 4 years for PulseX to 10,000x, all this stuff? How do you think about it?
It's tough. There's so many angles to consider. I think the big thing that's screaming to me is, if those projects weren't there, those products weren't there, would we get the same adoption on the network? And if yes, then yeah, I could see that being a bit of an issue. It's like, well,
so the numbers I just came up with today was like, we add 15% more adoption, but we lose 35% capital. That's just throwing it out there.
Right.
Like that would be the case against more meme coins, community projects, things taking capital.
Right. So then my question would be, okay, long term, because they're meme coins and people I don't know if this is a fair assumption, so I'll ask you here, just make sure this is a fair assumption, that let's say over the course of 5 years, you invest in something in an ecosystem, and over that course of that 5 years, you tend to learn a little bit more about that ecosystem and what makes it tick. And especially if you're going to keep investing in it, you tend to learn more about what makes the core of that ecosystem. Right. And so is that a fair assumption?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely, I would like to hear more positives, because I can see so many negatives that it's kind of making me swaying me on one way, but I would like to see if there's things that are missing too, that are like, hey, there's this huge positive benefit that comes from it. The keeping the people in the ecosystem, for one thing, would definitely be one. Right.
Well, the other way I'm seeing this too is okay, if you have people investing in the ecosystem itself, and those things are, in comparatively speaking to the highly engineered, structurally sound PulseChain, Hex, PulseX, those things over here that maybe people have a lot of money in, I think it's very possible that within 5 years, that money sees the people holding those investments don't actually see those investments as being the best place to hold their money, because they're like, maybe I see everything is kind of peaking, but you have these things like PulseChain and PulseX that, they haven't really been going up too much, but they've been solid. And they're actually when you look into them, they are the meat and potatoes of the whole network. And so that actually makes more sense. So, I see it's this cycle,
okay,
more of a cycle. I see people come into the ecosystem, the money builds, because it's money still in the ecosystem, and you need Pulse to transact on the network, period. So, I mean, you don't need a lot, and it's going to be so cheap for a while, even if it's in the dollars. Even in a moonshot, maybe let's say it's $5. You want to buy 100 Pulse for transactions. Well, I mean, A, you're probably good for a year or two, and then B, it's $500. And if you've made a bunch of money, it's not a whole lot to you. So, and personally, and I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, I give a 10,000x is great, but at the same time, the ecosystem itself is what we're going for here. And we're not trying to build an ecosystem for 10,000x. We're trying to build an ecosystem for people to get away from the actual thing that has been making crypto not be what it was supposed to be. We're trying to detach ourselves in a way, you know? And why the hell should we be so pointed on our 10,000x that we oust the people that we're trying to also save by creating the network and giving them a place to land, you know?
Okay. So I think that's a good point too. What are you optimizing for?
Yeah.
Are you optimizing for 10,000x? Are you optimizing for a community strong and vibrant for a long period of time? Because it has so much, mass of people into it, because all amazing projects. But if you say the most important thing to me is 10,000x, it seems like economic energy from other things around it, even though they add the community and the features that we want, like borrowing and staking and all this stuff. Still think there's a case for that.
And there is. Like, price performance is like everyone wants price performance. No one in their mind doesn't want.
If you had to choose one thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course, you're gonna choose price performance, at least to a degree. It's in there. What I will say too is that over time, if you give people a place to come that has great projects, it's a great ecosystem, it's detached, it's actually decentralized, it's actual crypto, it's not institutional money kind of crawling around under the surface, like basically you will get adoption over time that I could see propelling all of these tokens and these products to those prices anyways, because over time, maybe it's 5 years.
You'll be so rich, it's not going to matter. That kind of argument. Okay.
Yeah, I think that when you build the core of something so well, even if in the first couple of years, yeah, sure, you don't get the price appreciation you could have had, because that core of the ecosystem is so damn good. You're going to bring far more users over and far more money over in the long term than you ever would just by focusing on 3 products.
Yeah, I think, so when I was talking to Dixon Piper the other day, it really struck me when we're having a conversation about Hedron. He was like, I like Hedron. I like the NFTs factor. I like what it brings. I like the product, but I don't like the economic mass that it's technically taking, people there. I don't think it's crazy to say some people have probably sold their HEX. They've sold maybe their SAC stuff that they would have put towards PLS, PLSX and put it into Hedron, for better or for worse. So I think that was just the technical point he was making. It struck me as, wow, that is very interesting. Like, I hadn't thought about it that angle. That's what made you want to go down and say, is there, I think it really is what you optimize for. Maybe you're a person who optimizes and says, okay, I'm okay with 1,000x on Pulse and PulseX. I'm okay with 5,000x. If the community and the projects and the features are there and it grows in the way that I want to see it, maybe you're okay with that. Maybe like you said, 10,000x. We shouldn't sacrifice everything for 10,000x. Maybe that's a conclusion too. So I think it just comes down to, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think the technical aspect is clear, but how much it matters is based on what your goal is and what your situation is. So.
Right. And it is kind of like, we say 10,000x, it is kind of like the pipe dream, and it is great because Hex did it. And we kind of have this, we kind of have expectations. So having expectations at this point, at least on paper, we say we don't have expectations, but everyone's expecting a 10,000x, and let's put that in perspective.
I don't think it's too crazy, honestly.
I don't think it is either, but the fact that we're expecting it, I think if we got 100 or 1,000x, that's mind boggling, and I think that, if economic energy moves around in a way that we don't get the 10,000x and we get like a 2,000x or 3,000x, I'm like, to me, it is what it is. I think it's beautiful. Like, what's great in my mind, at least, about having something like Hedron and Maxi and all these things built on top of of Hex is that you incentivize buying Hex, to get something. You can also buy that thing, which at a later point incentivizes you to buy Hex to get that thing again and pulls the price of Hex up. You lock up Hex for a long period of time in order to basically do a 1, a 3, a 7, a 10-year stake, perpetually into the future. I think that there's just way more positives to the things that are being built. And plus too, in order for someone to understand Hedron, they have to understand Hex. And if they understand Hex, they might not put all their eggs in one basket because holy crap, this thing Hex is nuts. And Hedron's built on top of it. right? The
Yeah.
more you learn about these products, the more exposure you have to Hex. And the more these things succeed, the more chance Hex has of getting heard, I think, at least, and learned about by the masses, especially as all of it succeeds together. Can you imagine, like, in 5 years, headline being like, there's basically this talk about this Hex, Hedron, or I still don't even know if it's Hedron or Hedron. So if I'm changing up here, I don't even know.
You're changing up, but it's okay. I like it.
I can't make up my mind.
You can't be wrong if you're only wrong half the time.
That's true. Or if I'm right half the time.
Your glass is half full, sir. Your glass
always,
is half full.
always. But I can just see it being this thing of like, people talking about how successful Hedron was, how successful Maxi is, and also how successful Hex is. And it's like this triple threat that's basically built on top of Hex, that has spiraled this whole ecosystem with PulseChain and everything up into oblivion past anything anyone's ever seen. It's because these other things exist on top of the thing that we really, really love at its core, is what I think. So I think we need them.
Yeah. That's a good perspective. Yeah.